Week 14 is in the books. The new college football playoff rankings come out tonight at 7 p.m. I'll be live right here on YouTube for that, so come hang out with me. But right now, let's look at the top 10 list that's even more important than the college football playoff committees. Let's look at Pigskin Pete's. Let's go. All right, guys, if you're new here, make sure you hit the thumbs up and subscribe button. I do these college football videos and live streams year-round. There is no off-season for Pigskin Pete. As you'll see, I already have my top 10 up here, and it looks very, very similar to last week's. Because it is. If you notice, there's only really one difference, and that's number 8 and number 7, and that's even splitting hairs. I've had Cincinnati sitting there at number 7 for 6 weeks now. And I said they're not going to move up being to 6 or 5 or 4 without playing a Power 5 team unless some of these teams ahead of them start losing and catching multiple losses, which has not happened. All these teams, Florida, A&M, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Alabama continue to win week to week. Unfortunately for Cincinnati, Indiana continues to win as well. They had a decisive win over this past weekend. Cincinnati, by no fault of their own, had a game postponed. I think the postponement of that game is going to hurt their chances of trying to work their way in the top 4. There is still an outside chance that Cincinnati could find their way in there. They need a lot to happen. We may discuss a couple of those different scenarios today. So there is no change in my top 10. I know it's very anticlimactic, but by the way, I do want to say this too. I think you could take 7, 8, 9, and 10 and quite frankly, jumble them any way you want to. And I would even say there might be a 3-way tie for the 10th spot. I have Georgia there. Some people would have Miami there. Some people would have Oklahoma there. Some people would have Iowa State there. Some people at this point would have Coastal Carolina there after their win over BYU. So for all of the people that's been telling me for the past 5 or 6 weeks that I should have BYU in my top 10, they're undefeated. Now we know why they're not. That's the reason I didn't have BYU in my top 10 this whole time. It's because I didn't believe that they could hang with any of these teams in the top 10, and now we know that they can't. I'm not taking anything away from Coastal Carolina. They played a great game. They're a really good football team, but even Coastal Carolina doesn't belong in this top 10. I'm sorry, they just don't. Okay, so let's discuss some of the playoff scenarios because we're getting closer and closer to that time, right? We're only a week and a half away from the selection for the top 4 teams. We have the games this Saturday, and then we have the championship games next Saturday. All right, so I think there's 2 teams in this top 10 that are pretty much solidified a spot in the playoffs no matter what happens between now and selection day on the 19th. And that is Alabama and Notre Dame. Now, I say almost any scenario, okay, because basically I don't see Alabama losing a regular season game this week. And even if they were to somehow lose the SEC championship game to Florida, I still think that Alabama would get in that situation. The same thing for the Irish. Now, the Irish don't play this week. They had their game canceled. They're 10-0. Clemson's 10-0. They canceled their games, or actually Clemson didn't cancel a game on the 12th. They never had a game scheduled on the 12th. It was an open date to begin with. But after the Florida State game was canceled, they never made an effort. Either team or the ACC ever made an effort to reschedule that game. And then the ACC and John Swofford basically said you don't have to, and said the same thing for the Irish. The game against Wake Forest that was canceled was actually a game that was canceled earlier in the season. It was rescheduled, and they just said we're not going to play it. There's no reason to play it. So anyway, I think the Irish can lose a game to Clemson in the ACC championship, and they would still get in, and Clemson would get in. I don't see 2 lost teams getting in. Is it still possible for Oklahoma? I'm going to use Oklahoma as an example because Oklahoma's been in the playoffs several times during the playoff era. Let's say Oklahoma runs the table, beats Iowa State and in the Big 12 championship by 40 points, which I doubt is going to happen. I think that'll be a good game. But let's say they beat them by 40 points. Did they get considered? I say probably not. 2 losses, even if it was at the beginning of the season, 2 losses, and quite frankly, 2 bad losses to bad teams. You can't recover from that. The committee's not going to look highly upon that. They're not going to reward you with the playoff spot. So then you have the Buckeyes. They are the fly in the ointment. The question is, do they deserve to be in the playoffs in the top 4 if they've only played 6 or 7 games? Well, that's a discussion for people can argue until the cows come home. But Pigskin Pete is here to tell you, if they go undefeated and they win the Big Ten championship, they're getting in the playoffs. So go ahead and mentally prepare yourself for that, because I think that that's what's going to happen, provided that the game happens this weekend between Michigan and Ohio State, which is looking more and more like it will. So that's good news. No, not good news. That's great news for the Buckeyes and great news for the Big Ten. I see the Buckeyes smashing Michigan. I see the Buckeyes smashing Northwestern in the championship game. And I see the Buckeyes getting their way into the playoffs to most likely play Alabama in the first round of the playoffs there. So A&M's chances, Florida's chances. Well, Florida can win their way in. All they have to do is beat Alabama, and then Alabama and Florida will both get in. So there's a bunch of different things you can look at here. Here's the $1 million question. Clemson beats Notre Dame, so they're both in, according to my theory. Florida upsets Alabama. Do Florida and Alabama both get in, and the Buckeyes are on the outside looking in? Or do they put an undefeated Buckeye team ahead of either Florida or Alabama? That's the question I want to know. That might be the only scenario I can see where the Buckeyes can go undefeated and not get in. That might be the only scenario. So that's something to keep an eye on. So we've been having this playoff expansion discussion since the playoffs first began, right? It used to be the BCS with only 2 teams. Now we've gone to 4 teams, and now there's a lot of people that want 8, 10, 12, 16 teams. Some people even want more. I have been pushing back against the expansion. I think the more teams you add to the playoff, the more it waters down the regular season and makes some of these regular season games not as important. You can maybe be a 2 or 3 loss team out of 12 games and still make it into the playoffs. Now, having said that, I would be, because 2020 is so crazy, I would be up for, let's do an experiment. Because different conferences playing different amounts of games, starting at different times in the year, having different protocols for coronavirus, the whole thing is a mess in 2020. So let's do an 8-team playoff this year, just a one-off deal. We'll go back to 4 next year, but let's test the 8. Let's dip our toe in the waters here and see what things look like. And if the season were to end today, you'd have Cincinnati, Indiana, Florida, A&M, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Alabama in the playoffs. Now, wouldn't that be fun? It would be fun. I mean, for a one-year deal. And then you would have these teams on the outside. We'd have a 4 or 5-way race for whoever gets that 8th spot right now between Georgia, Miami, Oklahoma, Iowa State, maybe a couple of other teams that can maybe play their way into the top 8 between now and December 18th or December 19th. So that would be interesting. It's not going to happen, but I think of all years to sort of just try things out, I think that 2020 would be perfect for that. That's it, guys. I will see you guys tonight at 7 o'clock for the College Football Playoff Rankings Show. Have a good day. Pigskin Pete is chicken.